Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. So, before we get to any more launches, I wanted to take a minute and do kind of a little bit of a design episode, because what I have coming up is a Mars transfer window. That's coming up in about 160 days, and I've got a lot of things that I want to send out there, right? There's 4 things that I'm kind of thinking of at the moment. First, I want to send a communications network. That might end up being something a little bit like this, where we had the LunaNet 2 satellites where we sent that up to the moon to get communications there, but obviously we would want bigger dishes, bigger solar panels, and possibly to use radiothermoisotope generators instead of solar panels so that we get consistent power over time. So that's one thing, because we want to have good, stable communications over a long period of time. We will have really good communications so long as we have one S-band relay in orbit, but putting up an actual network is going to make our system a lot more robust. So that's the first thing. Second is a sample return mission. I want to do a sample return, obviously, to get science from Mars and then send it back home. That's a contract that we have, and that's something that I think would be a lot of fun to do. But that requires getting something down to the surface of Mars that I could then send back home, which is obviously going to be a bit more of an undertaking than anything that I've done so far. I also want to do a rover on Mars, and if I'm already putting a lander on Mars that can do science, why not make it a rover and then have it have a sample return mechanism of some sort? I'm not sure how well that would work, once again, but that's like, you're starting to see kind of what I'm thinking here. Got a comm network, sample return, rover, and then as a stretch goal, sample return from Phobos and Deimos. I'm not sure that both of them actually have a contract for that, but if we could, then that would be just lovely. So I could send 4 individual rockets with 4 individual missions. However, this only weighs about 2.5 tons. Obviously not obviously, but the Delta V might not be quite right, but the general idea is this is a relatively light system, just a couple of probes that I could detach. My rover, my solar-back rover, which I have updated to use RTGs here, only weighs about 213 kilograms, so this is not that heavy. A return rocket would be pretty heavy, but that might still be something that I could do interesting things with in conjunction with the communications network. So in my head, it seems like these things can all potentially be joined together and sent off in one mission. I could send off individual rockets, but the individual pieces are not so heavy that it's not possible to send it all together. So what I kind of want to do is go through a bit of an exercise and see what it might look like to assemble a very large multifunctional mission to explore Mars. So in my header on this one is the incredibly imaginative Mars exploration system, because this would be all four of those objectives at once. But the mass of each of these sections are light enough that if I put a little service module tug docking mechanism sort of thing on each of these, I could in theory have it all kind of joined together in low Earth orbit and send them up on tiny rockets, like on Cecil rockets or something like that, to join up in low Earth orbit and then launch one large efficient engine to push the whole mess out towards Mars. And I'm even thinking that the propulsion bus, the satellite bus from the communications network, might be the thing to use for that. But if we take a look at this, the core part of this bus is just this modular girder adapter that I have attached to avionics, fuel tank, RCS, and that whole thing. So what if I made this a little bit longer or a little bit bigger or whatever, and then I could put a docking port up at the top of this, and then I could just assemble each part modularly from here and launch them with different with different smaller rockets. So yeah, that's kind of what I am thinking, and I think this could be a lot of fun. So let's start thinking about what we could do and what the different masses and sizes and things like that might be to get this going. All right, so the first thing that I'm kind of thinking about right now is how I can get the largest part of this on the ground. So of the things that we have two things that we want to put on the surface of Mars, a sample return and a rover. So that means we're going to need landing infrastructure already. So good throttleable engine, parachutes, heat shield to bring it in, that sort of stuff. But we're going to also want to be able to put this rover on the ground, right? So we're going to need to be able to do both things. And so either that means I put the rover on the bottom, which I don't love because that makes everything have to be like a big sky crane, and then launching is going to be a little bit harder. Or I put the rover on the top, and then I put like a sky crane or something on top of it. So I'm just kind of spitballing here. So what I'm thinking is maybe I put something like this smooth cone down here, have that down there, thinking maybe a 1.5 meter architecture. There we go. And then we have something like this, and then there's like a rocket basically that is going to perform the landing underneath. The avionics 0.5 actually matter at the moment. Let's take a look at the lunar module ascent engine versus the descent engine, and I'm not sure why there's two. We got from RO engines and from RO capsules, I see. So which ones of these do I like the best, and which ones? Descent engine is about 44-ish. Those are bad. Well, there's not a whole lot of atmospheric pressure on Mars. There is some, but there's not a ton. So I don't think there's going to be too much issue with using the lower ISP and the lower thrust ratings. And they got 3 ignitions on the descent engine. And the ascent engine does not seem to have a number of ignitions on it. Oh, unlimited ignitions. Well, that makes that pretty intriguing for me. So we're going to need between 400 and 800 meters per second to land with parachute on Mars, and then we're going to need another 3,600 to ascend to orbit. And this is a pretty good engine for that, although I'm not sure this actually has throttle, does it? No, this is unthrottleable, so that's actually why you might want to use the descent engine instead. Although the number of burns on it is killer. Although there's no reason this can't be a 2-stage system. Alright, so what about something like that? So that gets us about 3,800 meters per second to orbit on Mars. We do have a positive thrust-to-weight ratio, so and we would also be removing this part here. So if I were to make this the root, we would pop that off, and we would actually have even more. So we could shrink this on down. Yeah, to about there. And that brings our weight down dramatically, which is awesome. Because according to the delta V calculator that I'm using, it requires about 3,600 meters per second of delta V to get into a Mars ascent. And that gets us a ascent module at under 2 tons. This would be 2 tons. We would want about 15,000 EC. That shrinks it down a little bit, and that has a little docking port on top, which would allow us to hook up to whatever modular architecture we have up above. So the ascent engine here has unlimited burns, unlimited ignitions, but it does not have any kind of throttle. So that would be a little bit difficult for us to use as a lander, but I think it might actually save us a huge amount of weight, because we would have to do something like build another landing platform underneath here. So another 1.5, just make a little copy of this, throw that away, do something like that. And yeah, so another... Yeah, even this is too much. And that's a pretty high... yeah, that's a pretty big expenditure right there. So that's kind of what that would look like for a to make that a descent module as well, but I don't love it. So, okay, so I've disabled the staging on this decoupler here to see what kind of delta V we have with this on top, because we're going to want another 400 meters per second like this, so we want to get to about 35. There we go, 36. That sounds just wonderful. That brings us up to a little bit less than 3 tons, but this should, in theory, be able to both land and ascend if I'm real careful. Landing legs on there, just got to make sure that we're, yeah, because look how heavy these damn landing legs are, good lord. Kills about 400 meters per second just putting these on. Yeah, I'm actually thinking that maybe I do need to use the landing engine. The reasoning is because every time I keep adding stuff, I have to extend this tank more and more and more and more, and that's not super great. Like, we're already at 5,000 meters per second if this thing was just bare. So let's shrink this way back down. There we go. And then we will add another stage, I think is probably the safest way to do this. Okay, so we're looking at about 1,400 meters per second on this bottom stage here. 1,500 now that we have that. So if I put on, wow, okay, sure. Yeah, we put on a boat tail so that I can actually get this down a little bit further. There we go. Hopefully that won't be too terrible. Let's increase this spring ratio because that was a big problem on our lunar lander. So yeah, we have that down there. And you'll see that decreases the delta V on this engine a lot less just because it's more powerful, I think. And we have a little bit more delta V to burn. All right, so I'm deconstructing this a little bit to kind of figure out what the heck I need to be doing here. So this part is going to need to be, it's about 1.5 tons, and we are going to need to get into, not just get into orbit, but also to rendezvous. So we're going to want 2 sets of itty-bitty RCS on this, I think. We'll just do something like that. I think we'll be just fine. Max level Aerozine and NTO thrusters will do for us. There's going to be some additional weight up here because we are going to be pulling samples up. So that's our return craft, and we're a little bit light on delta V, so let's extend this out a little bit. But like 0.55, that gets me to the 3,700 meters per second delta V. The calculator tells me we need 36, so we're going to need a little bit extra just to meet up and rendezvous. So let's just, yeah, 38 I think will be fine. Maybe. Perhaps. So yeah, that's my first thought here, is we will bring this up to meet whatever spacecraft we have up in orbit. I put this on top, and what I'm going to need now is I think I'm going to need some kind of sky crane on this to lift this off and drop it down gently, because we are pretty darn high at this point. The next part is how we are going to be doing our actual landing module. So the top here is 1 meter, base is 1.5. Bring the height all the way down and give some extra height up on top. 1 node and all that. For this one, we only really need to worry about lateral and rotation of the spacecraft. So I've just got that on there. So that should work. That up there. So 1,200 meters per second actually should be fine. And you see I've stuck a 3 meter lunar rated heat shield on the bottom. We don't need all that much ablator, but we do need some. So let's just put like 112 because we are just going to be using this to enter into Mars's atmosphere, and hopefully I'll be able to use this RCS to kind of control our descent. Then once we are in far enough, I can kick off the heat shield and then do a propulsive landing. We are going to want parachutes, but our our center of mass is weird at this point. So at this stage, our center of mass is going to be down here. Even as the tanks empty out, it's only going to be about halfway up, which makes things a little bit challenging as far as where I can put my parachutes. I'm thinking I might put them up here, but I'm also going to want to have, like, I'm going to need to connect something to the top of this for the sky crane also. So actually on top of a sky crane might be not a bad idea. We'll make just a little 50 millimeter structure here. That's weird. Okay, sure, weird. If I just grab this and put it like on top of things like this, it looks like I'm able to fix that weirdness of the way that attached. So we'll just put that there, and then that ruins it. All right, so it looks like I have to do something weird to it because I am doing very weird things. So I will just allow that. There we go. And we're doing something very similar to what we did last time, where I just want to have a little... All right, so if I make this the base and I pop this thing off, now let's actually see if I could just use these as the sky crane, quote unquote. So the way to check is you just grab translation. All right, according to Kerbal Engineer Redux, we do not actually have enough thrust to weight ratio to just lift this thing with a single set of 4 RCS quads, which is a darn shame. That would have been really neat. Like, we're not far, but I would just have to... Actually... Alright, what if we tried this? Yeah, there we go. That'll do it. Look at that. Okay, so let's make this a little bit thicker to deal with the fact that this is a very large, very large system here. Center this up a bit. Okay, so sky crane, boom. That will actually do for that. As you can see, that gets us a thrust to weight ratio on Mars of 1.5, which should, in theory, be perfect. In theory, of course. Like, this may not work at all, so yeah, we'll just have to see about that. But what I'm actually thinking is that means if I put that there, we don't necessarily need these, and I can just use this as guidance as we are coming down to rotate the craft and so forth. And that's 40 units, so that should be a good amount. Just give us a little bit more leeway on that. That should be good. 150. Fabulous. There we go. Oh, that needs to be high pressure, doesn't it? Let's make sure I actually have that correct. And there we go. Fabulous. All right, so that should, in theory, be a good way for us to get this thing down. So the idea here is that this whole thing is going to be dropped into the atmosphere by our larger transportation bus, and then it is going to be able to guide itself into a landing by putting its heat shield down, crashing into the atmosphere, slowing itself down, ejecting the heat shield, and then using the descent engine to land on the legs. We are going to want to then be able to do... Let's see, surface scoop of some sort. Pointed the wrong way. There we go. Alright, what weighs as much as this so that I can balance this out? Have that and a camera. There, that should in theory balance it out because that's also 5 kilograms. And that way it can do the soil sample while this is on the ground with these legs out, and then we will transfer the data up into this avionics unit, and then this thing can launch off after this has picked itself up and set itself down, ejected the decoupler from the decoupler, and then this will be able to rove off and do its own science and do its own thing on its own while this returns up to the satellite bus and continues the mission by sending home the science. So, okay, this is my thoughts on the landing and return system. So what we're going to have to do now is, that is our rover and our sample return. Now we need to figure out the communications bus and also the transport, because we're going to want to transport this entire system all the way out to Mars and then be able to get it into orbit. And then I would like it if I could send something back home. I could try to pack on more Delta V onto this ascent module, but I feel like having a bigger, more efficient engine on the satellite bus might be a better idea. So let's get moving on to what that might look like. All right, so taking a look at the LunaNet as the model for this satellite bus, I wanted to just take a look at what the what my antenna requirements might end up being. So it looks like at the same power level, so 35 dBm for both the 1 meter dish and the 2 meter dish, at the same power level we get a 141 bits per second transmit, 2.3 kilobits down at worst. But if we did it with the bigger dish, we would get 564 transmit and 9 kilobits down, which is better, but it's also a lot larger and a lot heavier. Actually, surprisingly, not that much heavier. Only like 12 kilograms heavier. But that's pretty darn big, right? Like that definitely increases the size of the craft that I'm going to be using. So I think I might just use a smaller set of dishes for now, just because this is a big combo mission. And I'd love to be able to just use this right here. Yeah, so each of these has a high-powered UHF Omni antenna, and then also the big S-band that is going to point back home. Yeah, as far as power is concerned, I'm going to have to pop these off and deal with what that looks like. I wonder if I could just do like this. Pop that whole thing off. There we go. Now let's take a look at what this looks like at Mars. So at Mars, these are not going to be good enough. These are tech level 1, I want to say. So yeah, they're just not going to do. Are these on individually? That's weird. I guess must have been the rerouting has made that a little strange. Let's see. We have Aerozine NTO. That's level 3. That's fabulous. These are also level 3 Aerozine NTO. I can pop this orbital perturbation thing off. I don't need this to do science pretty much at all, so save a little bit of weight on that. A little bit of Delta V is probably fine. Okay, so also we want to improve the avionics that we're using. This thing currently weighs 0.339. So if I say 0.4 at 15, or maybe even just 5,000, there we go. Wow, look at that. That's very, very light. I like that. I like how light that is. Shoot, do I even really need this little tank bit on the bottom, I wonder? Shoot, probably not. Not with SM4. Pop this off, pop that on there. Scale avionics, 7500, Aerozine NTO. Look at that. Look at that. That's even better. Oh dear. Although it is not balanced anymore. Okay, so now that I've got that settled, we see that we are consuming 0.76 power from avionics and communications. So we can assume that our avionics are going to be turned off for a lot of the time. So that brings us down to 0.48, which is an unfortunate number because it is just higher than one of these RTGs. So we're going to need 2. Or we could even do 2 of these, but they're about the same size, aren't they? Yeah, they're literally the same size. They're just one is better and more expensive than the other. And a little bit heavier, too. Fascinating. Yeah, so it would be nice if I could have better RTGs. Like I have some in the works, like this multi-100-watt RTG is just fabulous, but that's just going to be a bit out of reach for us for now. If I've got to do 2 little ones, then I might as well do something like this. There we go. Okay, so what's that look like as far as... All right, we are nicely balanced. Let's move our... Let's move... Oh, dear. Oh, no, that's not in symmetry either. Okay, so I have just now balanced out, resymmetried and balanced out our RCS. So there we go. That is what one of our little satellites is going to look like for communications around Mars. That's actually pretty darn exciting. I'm just going to save that as Mars ComSat before I move on. There we go. So I'm going to throw the rest of this stuff away. I'm going to reroute this girder here. And then I can just grab the decoupler. That in symmetry. Wait for the lag spike. And there we go. Now I've got 3 of them. And this is going to be a very expensive craft indeed, but it's not going to be that heavy is the important part. So yeah, there we go. That is our Mars ComSats. Fabulous. Well, what have I done? Such a bad feeling about this. But yeah, so that is about right. I think everything should be okay. So yeah, now it's just a matter of improving our main bus here. So this is definitely going to be a lot bigger because we are going to be using this as the main method of transit for a lot of stuff. And once I drop off all of my satellites, I can do something like, I can have this a second modular girder segment. Darn, I'm going to want to rotate these. Okay, that took far too long, but we got it rotated around so that now it shouldn't break anything when it pops off. Okay, so now that we have this all set, what we can do is we can just set up on top a repellent only docking port up on top, and that is what we will use to connect to the rest of the spacecraft and also to rejoin it later on when it is ready to head back home. So this is going to want to be probably a lot bigger than it is, because we are going to be using this probably not to leave for Mars, but it's definitely going to be something that we're going to be using to capture into orbit, which is a little bit more than 2,000 or 2,200 meters per second of delta V. So we're going to want something a little bit bigger, maybe more like an Agena, or even the AJ-10-137 might be nice. Because look at the size of that engine bell. It's got to be pretty efficient, right? It's also got a humongous rated burn time. So yeah, we could do something like, we remove that, we're looking at 50.17. Yeah, this thing has 6,302 meters per second of delta V with just half of its burn time, which is lovely. And the nice thing is that we could launch that like empty and save a huge amount of fuel on an initial launch, just depending on how much we want to have all together. Because, as you may recall, we have about 5 tons of other stuff coming. So let's see, 5.4, if we put that up on top, boop. Yeah, that brings us down to just 2,400 meters per second, so we're going to really want to crank this up. So yeah, that gets us to like 3,000 meters per second of delta V, which is lovely. So yeah, something like this I think might just do. Although maybe a 3-meter thing so that's the same size as the engine bell might be nice. Alright, so with avionics and stuff on there, that's kind of what we're looking at here. And that gets us into orbit, at least. We may want to find a way to... because the last thing we're going to want to do is get back home to Earth. So I need to figure out how much delta V that is. All right, so this is getting exceedingly weird. So inside on this part here, on the big tank, I'm going to be putting the return capsule that is going to take stuff back home from Mars when we finally get to that point. We'll be able to shed this whole thing, hit the atmosphere really hard with the big lunar-rated heat shield that will hopefully withstand everything, and then we will be re-entering the atmosphere. So, just putting on a little science core. Oh, wait, hold on. I have had problems with this exact thing before. I remember way back when it was no-go to have the avionics attached directly to the heat shield when I was re-entering over, like, Venus or whatever. So, what I gotta do is get the parachute flipped upside down and put right there, then the avionics, then another decoupler, then this big thing here. Oh my god, this is getting very weird and complicated. Actions, we want previous size down to 1.0, single chute, main chute. Earth is a target planet. Oh, we're not going to be able to do that until I pull the rest of this thing apart, but that's kind of the idea for now, is get this out there with enough delta V to enter into the Martian system and then come back, and then it's going to be another 2,000-ish meters per second, but it's not going to have much attached. So if I reroute down to this heat shield and pop all this stuff off, like this is what we'd be coming home with. So I need to add 2,000 meters per second to this number. Looking for 8,000. Oof, this is getting, yeah, that's getting to be difficult to do. Yeah, so I wonder if I don't need to have another rocket. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm not sure that's actually going to work. I think I may need to attach yet another piece to this architecture. Just because, like, even bringing this up from 400 seconds burn time to the full 750, I was only adding about 1,000 meters per second of delta V, which is not enough to get back home. All right, well, maybe I'm incorrect. Hold on a second. Let's see. If I increase this to 639, so that gets us 3,500 meters per second. So if it takes us 22 to get into orbit, which is, according to the calculator, about 1440 plus 670 is, yeah, 2,200. So if I remove 2,200, that gets us down to about 13. Yeah, we'll say even worst case scenario, we're down to 1123 on fuel, and then I pop this off, and then we're coming home, and then, yeah, that actually is kind of enough. I might actually be able to make that work, but we do have to add on all that additional weight. All right, so I've got the little parachute return capsule all set up and ready to go. So now I attach everything back on and move the root back down. And so once again, just doing this math, 5,900 meters per second minus the 22 to get into orbit. Well, I feel like my numbers are probably messed up because of all the different weird staging and upside down parts we have. There we go. So yeah, 3,552 meters per second sounds a little bit more realistic. Minus 22 brings us down to about 12-ish hundred. So we'll say we get down to about 1,100. Then I pop off everything above this decoupler, and that brings us to 2,800 meters per second of delta V, which I think is enough to get us home. Based on the delta V maps that I'm looking at, that should in theory be possible. I may have to do some like serious simulating of this mission to see if this is at all possible. But yeah, that that's kind of what I'm looking at right now as far as this mission. God, this is going to be weird as heck, but yeah. All right, so yeah, this whole mess is about 5 tons. So if I then just attach this to the bottom, where is my, oh dear. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now, is what I want to send out to Mars. Whew. Yeah, so that's kind of a lot. So yeah, we'll want to break this up because this is almost 30 tons of stuff, and we definitely don't have anything that can send 30 tons all the way out to Mars. So let's take a look at. Let's see. Does this hit all of my objectives? This does not hit my objectives to go to Phobos and Deimos, but I think that's fine. That can come later on. But even if I just get these 3 objectives done, I think that would be perfect. Just absolutely amazing. So this would get us a communications network around Mars here. This would get us a rover planted on Mars, and this would get a sample gathered from the bottom of this lander, put up into here, attached back up to this vessel, dropped into this avionics core here, and brought back to Earth, theoretically. But yeah, this does kind of hit all of my objectives. But I think with the way that this is built, like I can have, this is 5 tons, this is a larger one, but this can be done on like a big Titan 3D or Titan 3F or something like that. But we could, I could put up on top of here another propellant docking port, or even something like that, where this can then connect with, be connected with the rest of the spacecraft, rather than trying to put this entire thing into orbit all at once. And then finally, we are going to need a propulsion system that is going to be able to launch this entire thing out to Mars. Yeah, so it'll end up being something like this, a J2 up here, very heavily fueled, very large, very heavy, period. Yeah, this is a 60-ton tank of hydrolox. Then that is about what it would take to push this entire stack out towards Mars. So yeah, that's it's an interesting thing, and I'm gonna have to like play with the numbers and see how I can get this thing put together to make this a little bit easier, and to see if this is at all possible, because I'm still not sure that it is. But it is an interesting thing. But yeah, these are all the individual pieces that I want to get out to Mars, and I may have to get all of them out there separately, but theoretically this whole stack should work if I can get up a large enough stack that can throw the whole thing towards Mars. So that is what I will be working on. But yeah, so I will test this and play with that and let you know what actually ends up happening when we launch the darn thing, because I won't bore you with the testing. Yeah, so that will do it, I think, for me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know what you think down in the comments below. Like and subscribe and all that, and I will see you next time.